Been a while since we've done this. Tuesday, Newsday. So we finally have some more info on what most people bought Warhammer 3 for, and that is, of course, Immortal Empires. At the Skulls event, we got a trailer that, let's be honest, showed us absolutely nothing new. But now we have a blog post that gives us some actual information on Immortal Empires, when it's coming, what it's going to include, etc, etc, etc. With a possible release date of maybe possibly sort of August, but with the Warhammer 3 release as it has been, it really won't surprise me if that gets pushed back. And honestly, if it saves us having a release like we did with the original Warhammer 3, then that's just fine by me. The current plan is for the beta to come out in August. This is simply going to come out as an update to all players, so you're not going to need to opt into anything. If you're into multiplayer, it's not going to fuck anything up. It's just going to be an update to every single player to get Immortal Empires, but it will just be in a beta state. Now, the only reason this is being called a beta is because it's not going to be, quote, fully complete upon release, and what exactly that means we'll come back to in a moment. Now, we also have a bit of information about what Immortal Empires is, if you've been living under a rock. It's of course the giant playable sandbox map that combines the maps from Warhammer 1, 2 and 3 into a giant, basically a planet full of Warhammer. In this map we're going to have 86 legendary lords from all 3 games. There's going to be a load of new stuff like Be'lakor getting his own faction, and a few of the legendary lords that didn't have their own factions now have them. So that's Grombrindal, Helmand's Mayonnaise Ghost and Volkmar the Bold. Only 3 of these have been listed so far, but it's safe to assume that everyone that doesn't have their own faction is going to get one at some point. Some great examples of this would be the Warriors of Chaos, where all 3 legendary lords share that one faction, and we all expect that they'll probably all get their own factions upon their inevitable rework, which we would all assume would be with Immortal Empire's release, but we haven't heard anything about yet, so they'll have to reside in Grand Shitter's Central Station for now. Alongside all new factions, 29 legendary lords are apparently getting completely brand new start locations, which makes sense. We're getting this massive map that adds a giant section that's never been there before. You'd kind of want to spread them out rather than having them all focused into one tiny single southern left part of the map that just really makes no sense. And finally, there's going to be some improvements to personal faction mechanics for factions such as Volkmar the Grim. So this probably just means that any of the individual factions that don't have particularly amazing effects and won't really stack up in the Warhammer 3 standard are going to get a bit of a rework and a buff to make them feel a little more up to date, which is always good. Getting more faction mechanics, even if they're just tiny tweaks to units, is very nice. The only person mentioned here is Volkmar the Grim, so whoever else it is, we're going to have to wait and see. They're also introducing the new Sea Lanes feature, which allows you to, well, basically use the seas to get around the world, rather than having to traverse the entire map left to right. Instead of that, you can go to the left-hand corner of the map, for example, enter that sea lane and come out on the right-hand side of the map. You know, sail around, rather than just send your guy in a move order for 40 turns and praying that you're going to get attacked on that forced march. Now, this sounds like a great change, especially with the even bigger map. I know on Warhammer 2's Mortal Empires that if you're playing the dwarves, especially I think it's Grombrindal that has bonuses versus fighting elves, you never really ended up fighting elves because they had the complete opposite side of the map. So with this, you will now have the opportunity, which is a great change if you ask me. We're also going to see some, quote, dynamic endgame scenarios, which are mid to late game events that are there to challenge the player and slow down that steamroll that you all eventually get into. The examples they've given are something like a greenskin invasion or an undead resurgence. This sounds very similar to the chaos invasion from Warhammer 2 and of course Warhammer 1, but it sounds like they're going to attempt to give it a lot more variety, so it's not the same thing every single time. Because I know, like, once I fought the Chaos Invasion once, I just turned it off. It didn't add anything for me. It was just, oh, well, great, and I have to fight the Warriors of Chaos as well as whatever one I've got going on. But if it's like, oh, it could be the Lizards or the Greenskins or the Undead, that sounds like a lot more fun. Now, this, of course, sounds very similar to Solaris and their Endgame Crisis scenarios, and I can only hope that the ones in Warhammer 3 are as challenging as they are in Solaris, because those, you think, oh, I'm having a really great game, and then the endgame crisis hits, you're like, oh dear, I'm not having a great game anymore. I really need to change gears and focus entirely on taking this thing out. Many victory conditions for a lot of factions are also being reworked to be simpler and not required to have to play in a very specific and, quote, arbitrary way. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. Having very simple and generic victory conditions just means that you can play every single faction exactly the same. Like, if everyone has a victory condition where it's like, oh, own 20 cities and take out your starting war and have like 3 armies. It's just very boring. Whereas the victory conditions where it's like, okay, you need to own this city, this city, this city, and this city, and you need to build this specific building, complete this ritual, and do this, or whatever, and whatever. I just think it adds a lot in like the role-playing aspect of it. And I know it's a sandbox, so you can make your own fun and do whatever you want. But people want to get the achievements where they can get, you know, oh, win a legendary campaign as Lizardmen on Immortal Empires. They want to get that without having to do all the arbitrary stuff, but hey, that's just my viewpoint. I can make my own fun, I can still roleplay if I really want, it just won't affect the victory conditions. Corruption is also seen a rework with tools to let your armies more actively place and get rid of corruption depending on who you're playing as. Now this could be something as simple as a specific stance that your army goes into that either gets rid of or spreads your own personal type of corruption, or it could be something that's like, oh, you fight the corruption head on and it formulates into a giant undead army. Although that kind of sounds just like a rebellion, so fighting that, so I'm not sure how it'll work. But again, we don't have any information on this, so we'll just have to wait and see. And finally, it'll be able to have up to 8 player co-op or versus in Immortal Empires, and only the host will need to own games 1, 2, and 3 to be able to play on the Immortal Empires map. The other 2 can just join if they own simply Warhammer 3, but of course they'll only be able to play as any lords that they own, which in that case would probably just be the base Warhammer 3 lords. Now the reason that this is all being called a beta is kind of vague. Essentially, the reasoning is you're going to release it in a playable state, which means you can technically, as every single faction, play the entire campaign right through to then paint the entire map, complete the victory conditions, do all the missions, do whatever you want, and it will all be technically playable, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have the smoothest experience. It probably means there's going to be a lot of bugs, whether that's performance, glitches, visual bugs, etc, etc. It's going to be playable, but probably only just. Kind of sounds like Warhammer 3. I didn't have my light turned on. What an error. The idea is to launch it and have it playable and get loads of feedback from the community, and then slowly over time with subsequent patches, make it so that it is nice and polished and no bugs and no glitches, and it is a perfect playable experience, which I think is a good idea, and definitely calling it a beta. I think they should have launched Warhammer 3 in a quote open beta where you could play it, but it was in a bit of a buggy state like it was on launch, and then, you know, released it officially 6 months later. It would have just helped them save a little bit of face around saying, yeah, it's complete, it's a finished game, but it's completely riddled with bugs. This is a good thing to do. It doesn't really make any difference. They're going to release it. It is basically the release of Immortal Empires, but it's just going to be in a beta state. It's just saving them some face. It makes sense. I like it. Now, we have no idea how long this beta period will last. In the blog post, it says that since Immortal Empires won't truly be complete for years, but does that just mean releases or bug fixes? It probably just means DLC releases, but DLCs often introduce more bugs, so they're just going to leave it in beta until they've solved every single bug, or is it just going to be like a certain threshold of once we've completed all these bugs, it will no longer be in beta? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the day one goal is to have, as I said, Immortal Empires be playable. All the factions from all the games, everyone is playable. At the same time, you can play them right through to the end. There will be a ton of bugs, but it will be at least playable. Let's just hope it's playable in the sense that, you know, everyone can play it rather than it's playable, but you have to have a 3090 and run everything on low to get about 30 FPS. Now, moving forward, CA are apparently going to listen to play feedback a little more closely, both on dedicated feedback channels like, of course, the Discord, but also on late Reddit. So late Reddit is apparently going to be dictating the future of Warhammer 3. God help us. Major patches will of course come out alongside DLCs, and these will likely include fixes for a ton of minor bugs, alongside of course any fixes for the current DLC's bugs. And then in between these major patches, we will have intermittent patches that will fix more pressing issues. So if there's a bug where it's like, okay, if you do this single specific thing, the game crashes and it corrupts your save and, you know, deletes system 32 and causes your PC to explode, they'll probably have an emergency hotfix to get rid of that. Now for a little about this channel and how it relates to Warhammer 3 and Immortal Empire. So if you're only here for the news, thanks for stopping by. Have a nice day. I'll see you later. Now, as I said in my update a while back, paraphrasing here, Warhammer 3, as it is right now, without Immortal Empires, wasn't really that much fun for me. You know, you guys clearly weren't enjoying it. I wasn't really enjoying making videos for it all that much. So I've tried to branch out a bit with the Solaris content, and I've dropped Warhammer 3 to 1 video a week. Haven't really streamed. I haven't really streamed anything, let's be honest. I'm terrible at keeping up to a streaming schedule, but it gets so damn hot in this room, guys. What can I say? But yeah, I was basically just going through my list of Warhammer 3 videos that I had planned that I wanted to do before I left the game, and I've been working through those, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting kind of close to the bottom of that list. So when Immortal Empires comes out, one of two things is going to happen. Either it does really well, I enjoy it, you all enjoy it, everyone's enjoying it, their interest in Warhammer 3 comes back up, everyone is loving Immortal Empires just like they were loving Mortal Empires, and the game does really well, and I'm like, okay, I'm reinvigorated with passion for this game, and I want to make guides for all the other old factions, because, you know, the Empire, Dwarves, etc, all the other old factions, they're going to be in a completely new map, they're going to be in a completely new system, and let's be honest, I haven't really properly updated some of those faction guides in quite a while, so they could definitely use it. Alternatively, it's just another nail in the coffin that is Warhammer 3, and the game slowly dies a slow and painful death, and I just leave it behind because, you know, if it's like Warhammer 3 is right now, I'm not going to enjoy it, and I'm not going to want to make content for something I just actually don't enjoy. It sounds really harsh, but that's just the way it is. Now, I desperately hope that it's option number one, because, you know, these games mean more to me than, you know, just a way to get views on YouTube. You know, I've been playing these games for years before I started making videos on them, and they mean a lot more to me than, you know, the moderate amount of YouTube success, although that does mean a lot to me too. You guys, I really appreciate you. I really do. I don't say it enough, and I really do appreciate you. I would genuinely hate to see Warhammer 3 fail and fade into the dust and just be, you know, oh, wow, it's that game that could have been so much, but it wasn't. I want it to live up to that hype and that expectation, basically, that we all put upon it. You know, Warhammer 3 was going to be the game. It was going to be the culmination of all these 3 maps of Immortal Empires, and it's going to be the entire Warhammer fantasy world inside of a video game, and you can play every single person, every single legendary lord, and just have an absolute blast no matter what you're doing. No matter what happens though, I really do hope you stick around, because I love making videos and having this little community of people that seem to enjoy watching them. At least I hope you enjoy watching them. If you're watching for this long and you don't enjoy watching them, what are you doing? That's very strange if you don't like watching the videos and you still stay furious like, but I hate this, I need to watch it through to the end. I admire your dedication, but that's pretty strange. You might want to seek some help about that. Yeah, you guys really do mean the world to me. This channel means the world to me. I've loved making videos for years and years, as I always say, but this channel and it doing decently well and seeing everyone that enjoys it and appreciates it and, you know, likes the guides and the other types of content, it really does mean the world to me. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of my little heart. And speaking of meaning the world to me, every single supporter that thought that some people would watch the video and be like, you know what, I want to financially support this guy by becoming a member on YouTube or a Patreon on Patreon, it really does mean the world to me that someone would feel that passionately about the content and want to support it. So thank you to every single supporter. In particular, thank you to Henry Tuck of his support at the officers tier. So one final thank you to every single one of you for watching. And for now, I've been Colonel Damneders, and I will see you next turn.